Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, where we bring some mood lighting to our solstice service. We have some really this morning, and one of them is a song that we have sung the last 2 years of the solstice service, but it doesn't make it any less weird. So I'm going to teach this song to you because it's called Winter Solstice Chant. It sounds like this. Children of the earth, we have come to sing to each other, sister to brother, songs of our Mother Earth. Isn't that so cool? It's such a weird melody. Let's try it together. Children of the earth, we have come to sing to each other, sister to brother, songs of our Mother Earth. So when we get to the music of meditation, we'll sing 4 verses of this, but now you have the melody in your head, and you only have like 15 minutes to forget it. Mark Williams, come on up and join in the next hymn. It has some hand motions. I'll sing it through the first time and do the hand motions, then we can rise in body or in spirit and join in it together. Powers. Cut your power? That's not good. Ha ha! Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Please rise in body or in spirit. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Last line. Spirit draw near. We are so glad you're here this morning for our moody solstice service.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta, a beloved community that changes lives. And I'm so glad each of you are here this morning. Wherever you are from and whomever you love, you are welcome here. If this is your first time, or if you have not yet had a chance, please stop by our Welcome Center in the Social Hall after the service to allow us to get to know you a little better. You can sign up to receive information about services and programs being presented over the next several weeks. Due to holiday scheduling conflicts, the previously advertised adult RE class on Jewish traditions will not be taking place. However, today at 12:30 in room 1, just off the fellowship hall, all visitors and guests are invited to join our weekly Inquirers class. Additionally, all are welcome to join yoga teacher Joy Nurskern in the sanctuary on this Wednesday from 5:30 to 6:15 for a gentle yoga session. Drop-ins are welcome. This coming Wednesday evening, please join Reverend Terrence Strauss for Advent Vespers from 7 to 7:25 in the sanctuary. All are welcome for a contemplative worship experience as we seek peace and solace in the busy December days and long dark nights. And now, I ask that you please be sure to take this moment to put your cell phone in its most reverent position. Thank you. Once again, we're glad you're here on this beautiful fall morning. And now,
if you will take a moment to turn to the person sitting near you, maybe someone who you don't yet know, and welcome them into this sacred space this morning with a handshake or a hug.
Morning, my dear. Good morning, Lee. How are you? Hey, Jan. Hello. How are you, Karen? Hey, Phil. How are you? I'm sorry to hear about your mom. Yeah. Glad you're here with us. Gee, would you mute me? Would you mute me?
Spirit of life, God of many names, we reach out to honor the worth and dignity of each person is no small thing. Our Unitarian Universalist faith calls us to love the whole world, to offer not hell but hope, to honor the interdependent web of existence, to practice religious tolerance, and more than that, radical acceptance of different beliefs. The light of this flame is the spirit that enlivens us, and the chalice that holds it is our beloved community. May we become a refuge for those in need. May we become a diverse, unifying beacon of light amidst the darkness of division. This is our prayer. Won't you please say the chalice lighting words together that are up on the screens? May the light of this flame illuminate our tradition of seeking, invite all who yearn for acceptance, and ignite our passion for justice and peace.
Lines for Winter by Mark Strand. Tell yourself as it gets cold and gray falls from the air that you will go on, walking, hearing the same tune no matter where you find yourself, inside the dome of dark or under the cracking white of the moon's gaze in a valley of snow. Tonight, as it gets cold, tell yourself what you know, which is nothing but the tune your bones play as you keep going. And you will be able, for once, to lie down under the small fire of winter stars. And if it happens that you cannot go on or turn back, and you find yourself where you will be at the end, tell yourself in that final flowing of cold through your limbs that you love what you are.
Children of the earth, we have come to sing to each other, sister to brother, songs of our mother earth. Children of the earth, autumn soon will breathe her last breath, and quick with her death bear witness to winter's birth. Children of the earth, can you feel the air getting cold as darkness takes hold and sleep covers Mother Earth?
Let us put hands upon hearts and feel the warm connection. Let love in this moment flow. Say to yourself silently, I will love myself. I will love others. And that love will heal the world. At this time, we hear the joys and sorrows of this congregation. We send love to Bill Mengel, whose 93-year-old mother, Catherine Mengel, died peacefully on Thursday. Bill welcomes cards and emails of support at this time. You are invited to say the names of people you are holding in your heart this morning. Someone who needs loving energy. Speak their name into this holy space now. As humans have gathered for millennia, so we gather on this day to gently surrender to something beyond ourselves, to humbly acknowledge our mistakes, to ask forgiveness, to seek hope and renewal, to honor the earth that supports and sustains life, to remember that all beings are inextricably and mysteriously connected, and to feel that connection. Now, we still our bodies. We still our minds. We take in a big breath and exhale. We relax into this space that our intentions make sacred. We enter into the wise silence.
Children of the earth, we have come to sit in the darkness, breathe in the silence, think of our Mother
We Grow Accustomed to the Dark by Emily Dickinson. When light is put away, as when the neighbor holds the lamp to witness her goodbye, a moment we uncertain step for newness of the night, then fit our vision to the dark and meet the road erect. And so of larger darknesses, those evenings of the brain, when not a moon disclose a sign or star come out within. The bravest grope a little and sometimes hit a tree directly in the forehead. But as they learn to see, either the darkness alters or something in the sight adjusts itself to midnight, and life steps almost straight. As I say the words of this poem, I think about our worship theme this month, being a beacon, being a refuge, and how our congregation can be both. When someone encounters sudden darkness and gropes to find their way, we can be a refuge for the one who is learning to see again. And we hopefully aspire to be a beacon for them, to help alter the darkness while their eyes adjust. We must supply the resources to each other to offer refuge, to be the beacon. This morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received.
The moon is very important to me, and I never let a full moon pass me by without experiencing it in some way. And the story I have of this most recent full moon of just this past week is walking out of UUCA, out of this space on Wednesday night, and seeing out of the corner of my eye by the sidewalk before you get to the parking lot, Roger Easley with a tripod, UUCA member Roger Easley with a tripod and his camera set up just so, and he was scratching his head and he was trying to figure out how to capture the full moon, the light of the full moon between the lights of the trees that were lit up by Christmas lights. And I left so moved by his creative effort, the effort he was putting into this. And just that I was leaving this space, this office park, where people had brought so many gifts, so much creativity, the music that was being produced in this space on Wednesday night, the food that everybody made and brought to share together with their own hands, the ideas people were having in meetings, the spiritual connection and depth that people were establishing and creating. All of this was happening here right under Honeywell and Leapfrog and all the other businesses that take place here. I was so struck that through our artistic gifts, we have created this sacred, creative space here, right here, secretly almost, in this office park. And for all of your gifts, all the ways you contribute to this worshiping, creative, artistic community. I'm so grateful. It is such a blessing. I hope you feel that blessing too, to be a part of something so creative and honest and beautiful in its honesty. Blessings on this gift, your creative gifts and your financial gifts. May they go far and wide to spread more beauty, more art, more creativity in parking lots, office parks, and everywhere that it is needed. Blessings on this gift.
And now, please join me in the dedication of the offering, which is found on the screen or in your order of service. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action we call community, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings.
Now, I know I never should begin a sermon with such binary thinking. I try never to, but I do believe there are two kinds of people, those who went to camp when they were growing up and those who did not. So I want to see hands raised of those who went to camp as children. Okay, so if you did not, that's okay, because you can have the camp experience at the congregational retreat in April at the mountain. So we will take care of that for you. But I don't think that I would be here today, a minister, certainly not, without Girl Scout camp. At age 11, I was sent off to Camp Wild Rose in Middle Illinois, and the camp itself was truly nothing special. There were no horses, no lake, I don't think, only endless time for games, bonding, and singing into the night. It was my first time away from home, and I embraced it with boldness, feeling brave and outgoing. Something happened to me that week that has stuck with me throughout my life. One evening in the middle of the week, we had a clear, moonless night, only the jeweled net of stars twinkling high above us. And the counselors took us out on a high-stakes night hike. At one point, in the middle of the hike, we were instructed to put our flashlights into a counselor's bag. We are doing a trust walk, she said. Now, I am not sure how good the liability insurance was for this camp, because as hikes go, this was fairly treacherous. The path was rocky. It felt like we were high above sea level. At one point, we curved around the edge of a mountain. At another point, we had to cross over a creek. All we had to guide us was the hand of the girl in front of us. That's all I had to guide me, and her soft voice whispering to the person behind her, "Step up now. Step down now. Small jump now." I remember the complete disorientation, and at one point I realized it was simply easier to close my eyes. Closing my eyes sharpened my ears somehow, gave me the feeling that the girl's hand in mine held more weight. I could smell the water as much as I could hear the creek's gurgling flow. I have thought of that night often, how exhilarating it felt to stop searching for light, just surrendering to the darkness to feel our way forward into what? Mystery. For 12 little girls, the night was full of power and daring, realizing the dark was so much more than monsters under our beds, more than nothingness. Hand in hand, we walked right out of our childlike understanding of the night. And after what felt like hours, when we finally reached the end of the trust walk, I do believe it was 30 minutes, we opened our eyes and dropped our hands, whispering excitedly, "We made it through." Reverend James Forbes, a mentor of mine, reflects that since the election that brought in our current national leadership, there have been ominous signs on the horizon. And shortly after that election, a woman he knew met him on the street, and she said, "Pastor, I believe these are the last days." Now that captured his imagination. So he decided to look more closely about how the Bible was characterizing the last days, and he found in 2 Timothy, the first chapter 3, this wise description. This is what it says. "You must understand this, that in the last days distressing times will come, for people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, inhuman, implacable, slanderers, profligates, brutes, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure, holding to the outward form of godliness but denying its power. Avoid these people. For among them are those who are always being instructed and can never arrive at a knowledge of the truth." That's what it said. Very wise. Now, something is happening when things get this bad. I mean, we hardly know what to do with the criminality that is being affirmed in the highest offices of the land. I mean, we wonder, when will they figure out what to do? When will they figure out what to do now? But there is some good news. When it gets as bad as it's getting now, I mean, given what is happening in Washington and beyond the Beltway, something else is going on, I assure you. I don't know if any of you saw in the Times this past week, Michelle Goldberg wrote an op-ed. This week she thinks lately she is experiencing what she calls democracy grief. Did anyone read that? She writes, "For anyone who was, like me, born after the civil rights movement finally made democracy in America real, liberal democracy has always been a part of the climate, as easy to take for granted as clean air or the changing of seasons. When I contemplate the sort of illiberal oligarchy that could await my children, should Donald Trump win another term, the scale of the loss feels so vast I can barely process it." Now, I have lived through 3 of our nation's greatest tragedies. One was September 11th, 2001. I remember exactly what I was doing in that moment, as I'm sure you do. And then came December 14th, 2012. This week, 6 years ago, that horrific mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School that killed 28 people, including 20 first graders. I know exactly where I was when I heard that news. And personally, for my part, I also consider November 9th, 2016 to be one of the darkest days our nation has faced in recent history. I went to bed that night with a fever, coming down with the flu. All night, I awoke to my spouse pacing, holding his phone until finally the morning came and he was sitting on his bed, head in his hands. My fever spiked, and as he said the words that a reality television star had become the president of the United States of America, I was hit by a crash of nausea, then dozed fitfully, thinking it had all been a nightmare, until the fever broke the next day. And even then, I did not know how dark things would become. How rapists would be vindicated in the highest court of the land. How immigrant children would be treated, left in cold cells to die alone of the flu. I didn't know then that Puerto Rico would be left to suffer their storm in darkness for months, that each day civic discourse would sink lower and lower, that the ice caps would melt, the plastic would choke the reefs. And yes, it does seem like the end of days sometimes. Now, I have always been a sunny person, born in July, my favorite month. But for this season in our world, I knew no solar faith would be my lifeline for the dark night ahead. The sun, constant and persistently giving off heat, never a question, not hiding, just there. I've never been as sure as the sun, not about my own faith. So sure about the nature of God that it's just there for me to find. A light breeze maybe to move a cloud out of the way, and voila, perfectly clear. Now, the dark night of the soul means different things to different people, that term. It can mean the loss of faith by circumstances or beyond control. No one readily chooses to enter the dark night. The dark night descends. And when it does, the reality that troubles the soul is the apparent absence of faith. If God is light, then God is gone. And even if friends come around, well, in the dark night of the soul, they often feel like the friends of Job, not much help. The only way out is through. Now, I want to distinguish a mental crisis. I want to distinguish between a mental crisis and a crisis of faith. For some people, the way out may mean seeing a doctor and getting help. For true mental disorder, lunar spirituality, as we're calling it, waxes and wanes. It does not stay dark forever. So that is a distinction to be made. But the real question is whether you will resist the darkness or surrender to what can be discovered within. That's the real question. Barbara Brown Taylor, theologian, writes, "This widely acknowledged master of the dark night of the soul is John of the Cross, a 16th century monk whose best known work, The Dark Night of the Soul, was written during the 11 months he spent in a monastery prison. John was a Carmelite monk in the same order as Teresa of Avila, if you've ever heard of her. And like her, he believed in the ideals of a simple life spent in prayer and solitude. Believe it or not, this made the two of them rebels of their time. Teresa of Avila pressed on in spite of huge opposition, and she founded the monastery of St. Joseph of Avila in 1562. She prayed for a male ally who could help her found monasteries, and John of the Cross was the answer to her prayers. He became her apprentice and spiritual director of her convent. 3 years later, when John's superiors told him he must quit his job at the convent, he refused, becoming an outlaw to his own order. And on December 2nd, men broke into John's room at the convent, abducted him, and led him, bound and blindfolded, to a monastery in Toledo. When John refused to renounce his work with Teresa, he was beaten and thrown into a monastery prison, where he survived on little more than bread and water. After 2 months, he was placed in solitary confinement, where the only light he saw came through a slit in the prison wall. Now, this is ironic for someone who was being jailed because of his insistence that the path to God was through solitude, isolation, and relinquishing earthly goods. And so it was there that John of the Cross began to compose his greatest works, first by memorizing words in the dark, and later by writing them down. He escaped after 9 months. He fled to the south of Spain and continued to write down what he had learned those months in his dark cell. Now, most people who hear the name of John's best-known work assume that it is the memoir of a survivor describing the worst period of his life, because so many of them have been programmed to think of dark as a synonym for sinister. They open the dark night of the soul expecting John to tell them how awful it was in confinement and how he got through it by hanging on to his faith in God no matter what happened to him. But those readers will be disappointed. One of the central features of the dark night, he says, is to convince those who grasp after things that God cannot be grasped, that spirituality, that faith cannot be grasped. In John's native Spanish, his word for God is nada. God is no thing, not a thing, and cannot be held on to. For John of the Cross, God can only be encountered, like an event. Though the dark night of the soul typically refers to the individual's experience, it is also true that whole communities can lose sight of the sun for a time. But the dark night is a gift to you, intended for your liberation. It is about freeing you from your ideas about God, your fears, your attachments, your positive and negative evaluations about God, or even of yourself as a believer or non-believer, and the cures for all your doubts that there should be a cure at all. No, the only thing required in the dark night is to stay in it, to stay present and awake to it. Not to be too quick to turn on the lights, but to stay in it long enough to be led towards something else. And yes, I too resonate with democracy grief, this notion Michelle Goldberg wrote about. I too am struggling with the loss of the idealism of the Obama years, all that hope and change we were promised. But something else is happening now. Maybe when the moon of our democratic ideals is but a tiny crescent far away from us, maybe this is what it takes for new generations to become mobilized in an entirely new way. Perhaps, and I do not say this lightly, knowing that it will mean death and destruction on a mass scale, perhaps it must become worse in order to get better. Worse for the children who have enjoyed a steady forecast of relative sunshine to realize their place in their own democratic process and to act en masse. But what I do know is that darkness and light are not on opposite poles of our lives, though we may think of them that way. But emotionally, we know that joy touches sadness. We know that courage touches fear. We can feel like the light is very far away. We can experience that as a spelunking expedition into the caverns of our souls. But if that is our focus, then we will miss the gift that only comes to us in darkness. That trust walk on the mountaintop under the night sky so many years ago was notable for two major features. First, there was no turning back. How could I? I would lose all face. I would lose all sense of myself as a truth or dare player who always chose dare. My propensity towards risk rather than certainty. I would lead us all back into the light, and the light would have taken on a new tone then. Disappointment would flood us all under the cabin's fluorescent glare. No, there was no turning back. And the other major feature, of course, is that feeling my way through the dark, well, there was a hand in mine. She didn't know where she was going either. It's good to learn that kind of trust early. I still have it. This is still my belief system. I still trust that wherever we are going as a country, wherever we are going as a religious community, we are going there together. Some of us may be shuffling slowly. Others may be weary, ready to turn back, barely moving for fear of what is to come. And some of us walk sure-footed with certainty. Welcome to winter, to long nights and gray days. This is the time to reach out a hand, to find someone who can lead you forward, whispering in your ear, now step up. Step down now. Feel the warmth of connection reminding you that in community we need not resist darkness. Instead, we shall face the dark together. Tonight, as it gets cold, in the words of the poet, tell yourself what you know which is nothing but the tune your bones play as you keep going. And you will be able, for once, to lie down under the small fire of winter stars. And if it happens that you cannot go on or turn back, and you find yourself where you will be at the end, tell yourself in that final flowing of cold through your limbs that you love what you are. May it be so. Amen.
I'm going to invite Mark Williams up to join me for the last hymn. You know, when Mark plays his magic looping thing, I just think he's so much cooler than me. Every time, it's like alchemy what you do. It's such a neat thing. Our last hymn this morning is a beautiful Shally Jackson Denham song called "Dark of Winter." It's number 55 in the gray hymnal. Please rise in body or in spirit. Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let thy thoughts eternal. Gentle when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
Won't you join hands for the benediction? I hardly need to say anything. The joining of hands is benediction enough in some ways. We are often told at this time of year to be the light for someone else. And I want to tell you something different. The hand you are holding may need to walk in the dark for a little while, may need to find something there, the gifts, surrender to darkness, see what's there, maybe peace, some deeper learning. Find a way to join them, to not resist, and seek in your own heart what gifts the darkness brings to your life. Take those gifts and share them into this season, into your life and this world. Amen. Go in peace.